Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I am Purvi Trivedi. I am Head of Customer Engineering for Google Cloud here in New England. I am so excited to welcome all of you to day one of Women's Networking Annual Pinnacle Awards. I am so proud to open up today's workshop as the Pinnacle Awards continue to celebrate the leading female professionals in the Boston business community. Today, I have the honor of introducing your speaker for today's workshop, Moving Up, the importance of authentically bringing with rather than leaving behind. I am joined by Bernadine Desanges. She is the CEO of Know Your Truths. Her bio is right under the video stream. To maximize the conversation, I will let you all read the bio. A couple of housekeeping items before we jump into the conversation. I want to encourage all of you to think of questions throughout the conversation and use the feature on the right side of your screen to submit questions. We have saved time at the end for audience Q&A. And each of you bring a unique perspective to this conversation. So I want you to leverage the chat feature to share your comments, your stories, the ideas that you have with all the wonderful women that are here in attendance. Our goal is to make sure that today's workshop is as interactive as possible. With that, I will hand it over to Bernadine to kick things off.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm imagining all of you are joining me from the East Coast. As Purvi mentioned, I am Bernadine Desanges, founder and CEO of a consulting company and brand called Know Your Truth, Speak Your Truth, which is a platform essentially committed towards empowering individuals to engage in authentic, transparent, and vulnerable conversations to really curate brave spaces to not only recruit diverse clientele and applicants, but to retain them, to elevate them, to promote them. So I am so excited to be able to join you all this afternoon and to celebrate women and Women's Appreciation Month, Women's History Month, and to say you are all seen, you are all heard, you are all felt, you are all empowered. And I'm so grateful to be here to talk to all of you about the importance of authentically bringing all of who you are into your professional workspaces, whether that's in the corporate sector, the nonprofit sector, the educational sector, the for-profit sector. We all have our challenges. And so I'm intentionally here with my braids, my glasses, my gold jewelry, and my beads, because the importance of being authentically ourselves in the professional workplace also means being authentically ourselves for ourselves personally. And so I'm not going to share too much more about who I am, but really jump into this conversation, as I know that we are in a Zoom format. And so while I'm trying to be as interactive as possible, I also know that I'm also in a position to speak directly at you all. But I asked from the bottom of my heart, for the sake of this presentation, that when I ask you all to reflect on some statements, to really take the time to do that. And so if you have access to a pen and paper, I want you to grab that, hold on to that. If you have a cell phone and you want to take photos of the screen as I'm sharing it, I encourage you to do that. And as Purvi said, please engage in the chat. I'll be able to receive a lot of that commentary and the feedback. And so again, I am here for all of you. And while I'm speaking with you, I want you all to know that I am here to encourage, to empower, and to affirm all of you this afternoon. And that's what I believe my work is meant to do. And then also really put it back on you all to really take actionable steps in your professional and personal lives to really lead in that change that we're talking about today with regards to authentically being ourselves in the workspace. And so I'm going to ask you all a series of questions as I present. And I want you all to still raise your hands if you're at home, right? And if you're with colleagues as you're watching this, interact with them and have these conversations. And again, jot down your thoughts and your reflection. So again, as said, I'm talking to you all about the importance of bringing authentically all of who you are rather than leaving elements of who you are behind in the workspace. All right. So before I continue to jump into conversations, I do always love to set the tone as far as terms we're going to really be discussing today, or understanding the framework in which we're going to be discussing a lot of our topics today. And so some terms I want you all to keep in mind. for this afternoon is the importance of understanding and defining burnout, right? Which is a term used to describe one's health or becoming completely, I'd say, exhausted and discombobulated because of environments in the workspace. And so in this time of COVID, in this time of constant transition, whether we're working from home or doing a hybrid model or going into the office, burnout has been real, right? With this instant gratification desire that folks have of constantly being connected with all of us at all times, or the pressure we're putting on ourselves to respond to emails and text messages and communication, no matter which way it comes, which has again led to burnout, particularly more so in women in fields of professional dynamics, more so than men. I want us to think about and keep in our minds the importance of the word color brave, the phrase color brave, which was a term created by Melody Hobson in a TED talk that she presented about the importance of us not leading in the world colorblind, right? So some of you might be leading in professions where you hear people talk about, well, I don't see color and I don't really understand the importance of DEI work, which is the next acronym that we had, the next definition and acronym that we have here, or, well, all people are created equal. And if we're all equitable and if we're all equal and we're all for all people, then, I don't need to see color. But Melody really focuses on the importance of actually intentionally seeing color and recognizing that even as we're talking about women advancement, for example, the experiences of a white woman is not the exact same experience as a Black woman. May not be the same experience as a Latinx woman. And so what are we professionally and personally doing to ensure that when we talk about DEI, right, diversity, equity, and inclusion, inclusion with inclusivity, right, we are really creating platforms to have everyone have a seat at the table. Another term I'd like for us to really constantly think about is the hostile work environment. So a number of us go through experiences in our lifetime where, our places of work might not be the most positive, might not be the most reinforcing, might not be the most equitable place. And so what does it look like to be in a space where your workplace itself makes you feel uncomfortable, makes you feel scared, makes you feel intimidated? What are some of those legal ramifications around that? Who can you talk to in HR? If you are HR, who can HR talk to when HR itself is experiencing a lot of these inequities and these challenges in a hostile work environment? Imposter syndrome is another term I'd like to put out there, right? That element of like, am I good enough? Am I qualified to be here? Am I only on this job because, or on this project and in this assignment because I'm a Black woman, because I'm a brown woman, because maybe I'm the white woman, or maybe because I'm the leading ally in this conversation? I recognize that in this space too, while I know this is a space built for women, we have allies in this room. And while this is a space built for women of color, we have allies in this room as well, right? Who are supporting the advancement of women of color. And so understanding that our vulnerable population or our historically marginalized population will go into spaces where sometimes we feel like we are not worthy of being here, or we are only provided opportunities because of metrics, because of fulfilling a quota. But we're not really here because our talents are recognized or our voices are truly heard. And so while we're living and existing in cultures and professional environments that prioritize DEI efforts and have established affinity groups, are we only placing conversations around diversity on DEI affinity groups to have these conversations? In which case, we are then furthering perpetuating the reality of imposter syndrome in our historically marginalized population. Because if we're only creating spaces for folks to speak around topics that pertain to that, to this diversity that we're talking about, we embrace as a culture and as an organization, then we are also subconsciously sending that message that while we see you, we may not always value you. Additional terms I want us to keep in mind here are intersectionality, right? One of my favorite terms coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, who talks about the importance of the intersections of being a woman, right? Based on your gender or based on your race, based on your education, I'd say your socioeconomic status, based on your family dynamics. Again, understanding the importance of how the intersections of a woman, of a person comes into play in the work that they do. If we do not take into account intersectionality, then we are not truly encompassing spaces that embodies the entirety of a person. And so how can we, again, continue to uplift and to empower if we are not embracing all of who we are? And so while we want other organizations or our leaders to acknowledge intersectionality, I'm here to also encourage all of you participants in this space to acknowledge your own various elements of intersectionality. Microaggressions, common terms we all understand, right? Or we should understand, if you will, where, backhanded compliments, right? Or and I would encourage you all to join in on this chat. If you ever gave a presentation or were selected to speak on behalf of your department or to speak on behalf of your team, and somebody might have said, wow, that was great, you did an awesome job, or you were so articulate, or I really appreciated that presentation, such great perspective, I've never thought about that, and you walked away feeling like, while that's a compliment, you feel a little bit unsettled, right? Because that thought of, well, why wouldn't you think that I'd be articulate? Why wouldn't you think I'd present a presentation on behalf of my team or my department that was well thought out, very well laid out with details, very fact oriented, very data driven, right? And so it's these expectations or this idea that while we're giving compliments, they don't always settle well with us, right? And so again, as individuals in the workspace or as professionals, how are we cultivating these spaces where folks can not only be in positions of thriving, right, but also we can call out microaggressions, which leads to the other definition for today's conversation, I imagine for life, right? The importance of understanding representation, right? Again, we're in this space right now to empower all of you to continue to be the best versions of yourselves unapologetically in your professional workspaces as well as your personal workspaces, right? Because representation makes a difference. You showing up in a space 100% yourself makes the difference and leads the way to encourage other people to see themselves in your position. And as you elevate, continue to inspire people to do the same. And I'd like to close with this term, white fragility, which is very important for us to understand because, again, the truth, whether you're an ally or not, right? Whether you are unfortunately part of the dynamics of folks where folks might consider, your colleagues might consider you very oppressive, the person who holds folks down. White fragility is very, very important for us to discuss because as we talk about burnout, the importance of being color brave, imposter syndrome, hostile work environments, we need to acknowledge white fragility and its existence in a workspace. Because when a Black or brown person cannot, in fact, hold folks accountable and say that comment was discriminatory, or follow up with a question and ask you what somebody meant by a particular comment that either was a microaggression or outright racist and discriminatory in practice, right? Or subconsciously created an environment that made somebody feel uncomfortable. If we cannot hold you accountable to that, if we cannot have those conversations with you, if we cannot pull you aside, if we cannot document that on an evaluation because of the fragility that our counterparts have, of folks who don't look like us, right? We are furthering perpetuating, again, a lot of these ideologies and these racist infrastructures that we are constantly and diligently working to dismantle, right? And so again, acknowledging all of these terms for the day are essential for this conversation as we talk about the importance of unapologetically and authentically showing up in our workspaces. And again, I know I can speak fairly fast as well, and I'll keep my pace slower for you all, but I want us to really sit and think about these terms and even have you all reflect on how have you seen these terms show up in practice, right? In your professional spaces, and I'd even push you to say, where have you seen this show up in your personal workspaces, right? And if I were to tell you to pull out your phone right now and tell me who your top 3 main contacts are they people who look like you? Or are they people who don't look like you? The people you speak to the most outside of a work environment. So thinking about, again, how does our personal lives reflect our professional lives? And how do our professional lives reflect our personal lives? All right, and so now I'm going to slowly transition into an activity where I want you all to really have some fun here with me as I pull up some images of some historic Black women who are changing the game and or have influenced culture and have influenced various environments in politics, in social media, in writing, in mainstream. Again, and I want you all to think about who of these faces resonate with you and what attributes of these individuals are you referring to. For those of you who don't know, there's a new show called Bel-Air, which follows the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right? And so these are 3 Aunt Vivs and main characters of the show. And I won't tell you too much. Again, I'm not paid to talk about any of these individuals, but I want you all to think about these 3 characters who played one main character, these 3 individuals who played one main character on the show, right? And here we have the modern day Aunt Vivian, who's constantly going through a battle of how much does she allow her dreams to be brought into full fruition or hold herself back for the sake of her children, right? And are you that person? Or the first version of Aunt Viv in the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, who was very sassy, unapologetically herself, very, very intelligent, right? And a professor. Or the second iteration of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's Aunt Viv, who was a little bit more behind the scenes, super supportive of her husband and her children, but we didn't really hear from her too much. Are you the Rihanna of the world, where you recognize your power, who is now a billionaire and on top ranks with a lot of male counterparts, right? Who not only founded her own company, who's not only a musician, and a singer, but founded her own company with makeup, recognizing the importance of representation and having makeup truly replicate and represent all shades of women. And since Rihanna has created Fenty products, a number of other designers have led the way. So are you in fact a game changer? Are you an influencer in your company? Are you an influencer in your personal lives? Are you truly changing the game in the world? Rihanna not only went on to do that with makeup, but she's done it with lingerie, allowing diverse in body types of women to feel beautiful and to feel amazing in their own skin. Right? Are you an Amanda Seals who's unapologetic on social media, shares a lot, very, again, intelligent, but uses social media platforms to share her perspectives? Are you an Issa Rae who's an innovator who recognizes, hey, representation is not showing up in my workplace? Or I don't see myself here, so I'm going to create avenues where not only my people can see themselves, but other people can see that we are here too. Are you a Beyonce, a Queen Bee, if you will, right? Creating platforms and avenues and being around male counterparts and creating spaces where, again, she's showing that Black women can be in this space, right? Where Homecoming is one of her documentaries that was put out a couple of years ago. It's not only to signify the importance of her strength, but what it means to be a Black woman, what it means to be a woman shortly after delivering children and putting a show on for the world that was super influential in Black culture. Are you a Stacey Abrams changing the political scheme and getting an entire state to go out and vote single-handedly with people within her community? Are you a Maya Angelou, who is an influencer, talking again about the importance of our stories and the importance of our legacies? Right? Are you going out there and making change happen? Are you a Bell Hooks who's defying the odds about how we understand gender, how we understand what it means to be a woman, how to embrace ourselves? Again, merging that personal and that professional well-being, right? Are you a Tarana Burke who is going into the world and saying, listen, sexual assault is no longer permissible and should no longer be a norm in the workspace? Right? Are we holding folks accountable? Because again, let's not pretend that sexual assault does not exist in the professional workspace, making people uncomfortable on a regular basis. Are we again having these conversations and holding folks accountable? Are we the Serena and Vanessa Williams sisters? Right? Are you building camaraderie and fellowship within your workspaces? Are you saying, sis, I see you? Or are you the sister who feels as though there's only room at the top for just one? And so you don't have sisters building up a platform alongside you? Are you doing this by yourself? Or are you recognizing that even in spaces of competition, we can still work together? Are you a Kamala Harris, who was the first VP, thinking about your personal lives right now? Are you the first to ever do it in your organization? Are you the first to ever do it in your family? Are you the first to ever do it in your community? Are you the first? Are you the second? Are you the third? Do you have shoes to fill? Where do you see yourselves? And what does that look like? And what does that mean to you in practice, in reflection, in execution? Are we a Viola Davis? Right? Leading the way, and every single time she has a platform, she brings up other sisters with her. She encourages us to think about the sisters who are right, the sisters who are left, the one behind us and in front of us. Are you bringing up the names of women, diverse women, women of color, your colleagues into spaces that they are not in? Or are you waiting for the invitation? Are you waiting for the nominations? Right? Or are you, again, transparently and authentically bringing people up into spaces, not waiting for permission, but doing it because you must? Are you an Oprah or a Shonda Rhimes, creating platforms where all people can see themselves and have conversations, breaking financial ranks, being on primetime television? But again, in your personal lives, are you creating spaces where people can hear and see themselves? Think about the type of woman you are. Where do you see yourselves? And even as I'm having these conversations, do you not see yourselves in any of these women at all? And ask yourself, well, if I don't even see myself in any of these popular mainstream women, then where do I belong? Where do I fit in? Have you ever even had moments of doubt with regards to this? Are we the Claire Huxtable, who was the lawyer, the mother, the wife, the sassy woman, the one up front with her hair done, with the lipstick, always dressed and ready to go? Is that a choice you have, or is that an expectation that was imposed upon you? Our First Lady, Michelle Obama, again, who could potentially have run for president herself, but stood by Barack Obama, raised 2 children, but she herself paved a way. So again, behind certain mainstream understandings, created a platform for herself where she could authentically be herself in all spaces, being an author of Becoming, right? Pushing health and nutrition in our schools, going on to like mainstream television, like Blackish, right? Showing up and showing out and having various conversations. So again, and being a fashion icon. So despite common narratives or how one should be, created a platform for how she herself needed to be and needed to show up. So I need us again to constantly think about the woman we are and who we are in our spaces and how we show up. And to allies in this space, as we are having this conversation, to empower the Black and Brown woman. Do you truly see the Black and Brown woman who is your colleague, who is your director, who is your CEO, who is your CFO, who is your manager? Or do you acknowledge her only to talk to her when you need her? If at all you want to acknowledge her, period. Because again, as Kimberly Crenshaw says here, if you see inequality as a them problem, those people over there, or that's unfortunate for those other individuals, right? It's a problem, again, everywhere else but here. That within itself is a problem. Because we are having this conversation with this Pinnacle workshop and awards conversations to empower our Black and Brown women and allies in this space, because we still have a deficit, because there is still a challenge. And we'll talk more about that. But to the women, again, in this space, I encourage you all to see all of these faces that we have here and to recognize that these smiles behind these brown eyes are yourselves. Because there's no reason why you don't deserve an Emmy nomination and award every single day. There's no reason why you aren't the significant author of your own life story. There's no reason why you're not a mother who is thriving, who is deserving of recognition. And if you are a woman who does not have children, you are not inferior. That is, whether that is a personal choice or part of a medical condition, you are not any less than of a woman than somebody who does have children. And however you choose to show up in your partnerships and to your love lives, again, that is not the sole element of what defines you. But we need to have these conversations as we're talking about professional and personal advancement, because they intersect, they come together. And as we embrace and as we have these conversations, that is truly when we empower all that is the Black and Brown woman professionally and personally. And if you are a leader in this space and you recognize that you might have 1 or 2 or 5 Black and Brown people on your team and diversity is important to you, you need to think about how are you going to recruit talent, but most importantly, how do you retain talent? And once you retain that talent, what is your process in elevating that talent? Right? All of these women are talented, influential individuals, many of which created their own pathways outside of the norms, which again is why we're here today to talk about life outside of norms. Where do you see yourself? And as I continue on with the conversations of reflection, I want you all to really take a moment and ask yourselves these questions. And as I said earlier, I want you all to raise your hand if certain comments apply to you. So even in your own homes, don't be shy if you're by yourself, or even if you're around loved ones right now. I want you to really raise your hand, or just give yourself a pat on the back, or just acknowledge whether or not this statement applies to you. Are you proud of the person that you are today? And I want you to really think about that. Are you proud of the person you are today? And if you are, why? And if you're not, why not? I want you to also think and reflect on, when I just asked you if you are proud of the person you are today, Did you instantly consider professional accomplishments first? Are your accomplishments very much the definition or the defining factors of what makes you proud? How much of your personal life is contributed to your excitement and to your joy? I want you to raise your hand or acknowledge whether or not you made personal and professional sacrifices to be where you are today. Did you make personal and professional sacrifices to be here? Not just on the Zoom call, but to be in your professional roles, to be in your personal roles, to play the roles you play in your friendship circles. Did you make sacrifices? Take it a next step and even think about what are those sacrifices, right? I want you to think about if you have any personal or professional regrets about your journey of becoming the person you are today. Regrets, that's deep. Sometimes we've made choices that we thought were great at the time, and in hindsight, we might not agree with them anymore. They might eat at our core. What are we doing with that pain? What are we doing with that regret? What are we doing with that shame? Are we even talking about it? Are we going to therapy to process it? Are we reading books? Are we watching shows? Are we reading articles? Or do we just sit in complacency? Or does it impact our productivity? Does it impact how we show up? Are we even in spaces personally and professionally that allow us to acknowledge regrets, that allow us to acknowledge mistakes, setbacks? And another question. And lastly, I want you to think about if you see important elements of your identity reflected in your workspace. Do you see yourself in your workspaces? When I asked you to think about the person that you are today, and if you're proud of that person, think about the reasons why you are proud of that person, the person that you are today. And if we were in person and we had a lot more time together, I would ask you all to write a list of why you are proud of yourself, to really have you reflect on whether or not you even see versions of yourself where you work. And then ask you, why are you still there? Are you there because you know you're going to be elevated and promoted? Are you there because you know your worth is acknowledged and celebrated? Or are you there hoping, believing? Or are you there and you're bitter and you're upset and you're frustrated? Are you jaded? Are you inspired? Are you encouraging? Are you leading? Are you being led? And are you being supported? Again, various iterations. There are levels to these conversations. And in our time together, I wouldn't even say scratching the surface. I said we are acknowledging the truths we already know exist. And we are taking a moment to just breathe and acknowledge and to affirm that we are not alone in these spaces, in these conversations. And to allies, if this is your first time hearing this, understanding this, or being exposed to this, it is now your responsibility to engage authentically and genuinely with your colleagues to have these conversations, because I'm sure it exists around you. The question is whether or not you're creating spaces to allow it to be addressed and discussed. And all of this is important, again, because as we have these conversations and we can critically look into statistics, the data speaks for itself, even in the year of, right now we're in 2022, but thinking backwards for 2021, the reasons why we're in this space to begin with is because the numbers speak for itself. For any of you who are working in corporate America, Forbes and Fortune highlighted the importance and the major changes that have existed in corporate America, because 41 women chief executive officers are in lead positions at Fortune 500 companies, right? That is huge. That is a huge statistic for corporate America. That's just 8.1% of the entire Fortune 500 industry. And two black women ran these companies in 2021. Now, while these are great strides, if you will, are they truly that amazing? We have to also understand when we talk about progress and we say change is happening, are we truly satisfied with just 8.1% in 2021? Now, I'm a person, I'm not a pessimist, right? My glass is always half full more so than half empty. However, these statistics is nothing to celebrate in my humble opinion. Because in 2021, we shouldn't be having a conversation about the 8.1% of representation. We should not be having these discussions. How about the corporate ladder still impacting women of color disproportionately to everybody else? What is your place of work doing to change that? What are you doing to change that? Are you in a position to change that? Are we having genuine conversations about mentoring opportunities, sponsorship opportunities? Are we increasing somebody's financial wealth and well-being within these opportunities? Or are we just allowing Black and brown women to just commit more of their time and to volunteer their time and their talents without compensation? And as a Black and brown woman in this space, are you just generously giving of your time without holding leadership accountable to say, you better compensate me for my intelligence, compensate me for my time, recognize my contributions and elevate me and promote me off of this? This is not community service when it's a place of employment. How direct are we in having these conversations? As an ally, are we saying, I am not going to wait for you to ask for the promotion. I will see your efforts and I will back that up with all the reasons why you should be promoted. I will create a role where there is not a role for you, because that's my commitment to you. When we have these conversations again around celebrating women and Women's History Month and Women's Appreciation Month, I said from the beginning, I am so excited to be in this space. But ladies and gentlemen and others in between, we need to acknowledge the disproportionate representation that we have in this space. We need to see it, and we need to hold each other accountable for it. And as we're having more again of these conversations about showing up authentically in our spaces, I ask us to think about what our canvases look like. How are you showing up authentically? What choices of words are you using in the professional workspace? How are you styling your hair? What clothes are you wearing? How are you accessorizing yourself? What does your office space look like? What does your cubicle look like? Whose photos are up? Are there photos up? Are there quotes up? Do you have books in your space? Who are we bringing into the space? Who are we showcasing to others that we are? When we think about the roles we play personally and professionally, ask yourselves if you are the advocate for others and yourself. Are you a mentor, creating pathways for others, giving guidance? Are you a sponsor by advocating for that upward mobility for somebody else? Are you just a colleague where you show up, clock in and clock out? Are you the collaborator, creating spaces for cultivating ideas together? I'd also bring out, are you the oppressor? Are you the person in the space who shuts down every opportunity and chance to really address change? Again, real, authentic conversation, knowing your truth, speaking your truth, and showing up in these spaces are essential. In addition to the authenticity, we need to talk about self-preservation, because as I said, burnout is real. To all of you women in this space, I need you all to take time off. The guilt we feel in doing so, the responsibilities we feel we leave behind, take time off. We cannot celebrate you if you are not here to be celebrated. We cannot acknowledge your contributions if you are not here to make them. Rejuvenate, fuel into your cup. Know when to step up. Know when to step back. Be very intentional about what you're going to do with your time and how you're going to utilize that. I'd encourage you all to write this list down or take a picture of it and be very direct about when you're doing these things. When will you step up? When will you step back? When will you speak up? When will you hold back? And recognizing that holding back is not necessarily silencing and allowing the oppressive mentality to win, but it is encouraging too. It is saying, I am not going to deal with this one. It is your turn. When do you apologize? When do you delegate a task? When do you advocate? And most importantly, in this day of COVID and virtual responses and virtual spaces, when are you turning your phone off? When are you saying no emails past a particular time and staying true to that? What boundaries are you setting in place as far as when you're responding offline, when you are showing up? Real critical conversations and assessments in this analysis, again, about self-preservation and showing up in the workspace of how we create our spaces, how we show up on our own personal bodies as far as canvases, our professional workspace as a canvas. But again, how are we preserving ourselves and our livelihood? We must have these conversations. And as I close, I just want to share a couple of resources for you all just to consider. And there are thousands out there for us Black and brown women to feel empowered. And there are a lot more resources out there for allies too. But for all of you to stay encouraged in this work, and I say thank you for showing up here. Thank you for showing up where you work. Thank you for being a leader. Thank you for being a CEO. Thank you for being a director. Thank you for giving of yourselves in more ways than one. But to fuel your cup, read a couple of books like The Memo if you haven't already, or What I Know for Sure by Oprah. Watch the TEDx TED Talk video, Colorblind or Color Brave, to the point that I was talking about. Check out a couple of shows for pop culture. Engage in conversations, change the tone of your work environments. Corporate America might have a way of being, but we instill that culture and that understanding by allowing it to exist based on the way we conform. We can lead and we can change. And I believe in you all to do just that. So I see that we don't have too much time. We got a couple of minutes of some questions. I'll take one or two, but I always love to close every session I ever get to do with anyone with affirmations. And so I want you all in your own time, in your own space. So right now with me, as I read this aloud, as I jump into questions right after that with Purvi, to remind yourselves that you are you by saying, I am me. I am the conviction to show up intentionally in my choices. I am the courage to speak up when necessary and the vision to hold back without guilt. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. I am the product of hard work, joy, pain, and laughter. I am unapologetic about my existence. I am change. I am here. I matter. You will see, hear, and honor me. I will see, hear, and honor myself. I am. Because for all of you in this space, you are who you are. The world needs you. I need you. I celebrate you. I thank you. The Pinnacle Award goes to all of you, in my humble opinion. Okay? Because you're all fantastic that very way. And I thank you all for your time here. And so, Purvi, happy to take a question or two.
Bernadine, thank you. Thank you for this amazing, inspiring session. I had goosebumps as you were talking, and I'm sure fellow audience here felt the same way. I was reading the comments, and a lot of the comments acknowledge what you're talking about, acknowledging the truth. What do your spaces look like? Are you bringing other women with you as you go up the ladder in your career? Such amazing topics. I am going to try to cover at least one or two questions for us. So the first one, which I think will resonate with the rest of the folks as well. How did you get started on your journey, and what kept you motivated on your path to success? This was from Jess.
Oh, well, thank you, Jess, for this question. This got started because I didn't always see myself. I've experienced microaggressions where people always complimented me for being so articulate. I had dreams of being an attorney, not a traditional attorney, but really going into HR work and diversity work and having these conversations. I'm in law school right now to make that happen, because the older I get and the more exposed I become, I see less and less of us here. And we see it in our paths in life, right? Where the higher up we go, the less of us there are. But as we're climbing up this ladder too, bits and pieces of us are being left behind. Right. And so that's why we're in this space. Well, I don't have to leave parts of myself behind. I will bring all of who I am into these spaces. But we have to give ourselves that constant reminder and that constant affirmation and say it matters. It makes a difference. And so by seeing a lot of my mentors and my sponsors struggle themselves, and us being able to have these conversations authentically, transparently, and vulnerably, right, has empowered me to continue to keep up with that work, to show up in my spaces myself, but to also create a platform where the idea, the mission, the purpose is to encourage people to do the same. And so I say, you are all change agents in your own lives, and you all know this, right? But showing up authentically, transparently, and unapologetically is an intentional choice. And we have to decide whose ideologies are we choosing to conform to and whose ideologies are we choosing to uplift. And my goal is that you always choose your own.
Beautiful. And I think the second question ties really well to what you just said. Looking back at your career, did you have a mentor? If you could talk about one mentor that really stood out in your life. This was from Angelica.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Angelica. I absolutely had a mentor. To be quite frank, the one I would highlight right now, I would say, is my mother. I'm a first generation Haitian American born here. And growing up, I didn't always see the same way my mom saw life, right? I knew she sacrificed a lot. And I think in her own passage of life, she didn't finish high school. She didn't finish college. She tried in various entities as a single mother to raise 3 children and didn't always make it. But to say she's not worthy, to say she's not a CEO of her life, to say she's not the CFO of her life as a single mother owning a multifamily unit, raising her children in the city of Boston, there are skills there that somebody might not be able to quantify or qualify based on a resume, but she definitely understands finances. She definitely understands group dynamics with 3 different children. She definitely understands the dualities of existing in this world as an American, as an immigrant, right? And so she understands the intersections of life as a Black woman. And so part of my work and part of my focus is to also encourage people to see beyond the general expectations of what is listed on a resume, but to really take the time to understand the candidate and to acknowledge that even though you can't say their name doesn't mean they're incompetent and incapable of doing a job. Right. And so my mother, I would say, is my starting mentor because her life has led me to understand the various lenses of which we need to acknowledge, celebrate, and empower individuals. Just one.
Oh, that was so beautiful, Bernadine. And I will read a comment that came through from Nohilani. This session has been both inspiring and empowering. I love the intersectionality pieces on being your authentic self, both in your personal and professional life. And the affirmations were amazing. I actually took a little print screen of your slide as well. I think we all need those. Thank you. Thank you for an amazing session.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And my screen is not shared right now, is it?
It is shared. Yep.
Okay. No, well, I wanted to share it only because I wanted to also share my contact information with folks. And so let me see. Yes, absolutely. Because my goal is to always, again, stay encouraged and stay connected with all of you. And so I thank you all for being in this particular space with me because you all didn't have to be here, right? But you all chose to be here. And give me 1 second as I just pull up everything. The world of Zoom. But I want you all to know that I am here, I am accessible, and you are all inspiring to me. Once I was contacted to present, I said, absolutely, 40 minutes or 35 minutes is never enough time, right? Because we're talking about ourselves. But I want you all to understand that data certainly does drive a lot of what we do, but behind every data point, behind every statistic is a real person. And I need us to acknowledge the importance of that. I need us to lead with humility. I need us to lead with transparency, and I need us to apologize. And I need us to say sorry, and I need us to move over and make way for other people. Whether you're an ally in this conversation, whether you're a leader in this conversation, recognize when we're burnt out, recognize when we're jaded, recognize when it's time to have more innovation, recognize where we've been leading in one way and it's time we need to lead in a different way, right? But again, these are not easy conversations to have, but that's why we need to have the courage and the strength to show up. Because being able to lead that way, now that's changing lives. That's changing the metrics. That is saying that 8.1% is not enough, and it should be 50-50, if not 70-30. So any other questions or commentary? I want to be able to see this chat in a second.
Well, thank you all for joining for today's session. Thank you again, Bernadine.
Thank you. Thank you.